Hi, it's Janet, and it's Writing Wednesday. I'm back from Davis, so it's Writing Wednesday on Wednesday, uh, back in LA. It was absolutely beautiful up in Davis, which is near Sacramento. It's California state capital. Very lush. It's our big agricultural area, and driving along, I hit a stretch of orange groves that are in blossom right now, and the smell was so beautiful. My grandmother used to say she moved here in 1922, and when the smell of in Los Angeles of the orange groves was profound. Linda. And so much sensual information up there. Everything was blooming. I know people were having terrible trouble with their allergies, but everything was in bloom. You know, roses as big as your head, and plants. I had to, figure out what they were, of course, because I have to know the names of everything. But just everything is so green after the recent rains and the swelling of the hills and the way the shadows would fall, and the live oaks and the coast oaks and the water oaks, and it was definitely a pull over and get my pad out and describe what I was seeing. It was absolutely beautiful. So today we have a question about characterization, and it's Linda writes, I have a question about character creation. I'm struggling because I find every time I attempt to create a facet of character, I envision a characteristic of someone I already know, and they take over. Even with the character I would not necessarily like, I end up thinking, why would I want to spend time with someone I don't like in my head? Well, that's you are creating every character in your book. You have selected them for a reason. There is something about their story or a figure like that performs some action in the story that you need. There's a reason that you selected these people, the situation, the setting, everything. So rather than struggling to depict someone exactly as they are, realize that everybody you've chosen is a reflection of some part of yourself. There is some reason that you have selected this person, and your reason or what they represent to you is more important than who they are. So if you find them taking over the actual person who you are basing that character is taking over from the fictional character that you are creating, then try to step back a little bit and introduce another character, another figure who is also maybe somebody vivid in your mind, and you can join those characteristics together to create a more fictional character, rather than picking one person and making that a character and then not being able to break away from who they actually are. Blend that person, if it's based, say you have a character who's a mother and you picture your mother in it. Well, think of the ways in which your character is not your mother, the ways they're like, your colleague at work, the ways in which they're like you, and maybe pick somebody visually from a photo book from actors that you think sort of resemble the character in some way, and write off of their photograph, their mannerisms, see a film and stop action. look at their gestures, their mannerisms, their way of speaking, and see if you can make a more fictional character, so that this character does not become just an actual person, because that's not fiction. Um, that might be a way to deal with this question. Um, every time I attempt to create a facet of character, I envision the characteristic of someone they already know. Well, that's okay. Um, but why that should take over in a way that you find upsetting. You don't want to spend time with them once you've created them. It seems like there's a reason you created them. There's a reason why you've chosen those characteristics. They must serve your story. They must express something that you wanted to talk about. And then when it starts going, you kind of lose heart. You lose your courage. If you've chosen these characters, if there's a reason, if they're not holding up, if the conflict is fading because you've introduced this character, well, obviously you need to modify the character. If it's bringing up unpleasant things, you pick that. There's a reason why you picked it. So sometimes it's good to think again about your situation. The situation, we've talked about the X, Y, and Z story structure. There's a reason you've picked the situation Y and the character X. And if you're on first draft, you might want to just keep going. But if you want to, you absolutely can post questions. Just keep them short, because I can't open them up and concentrate at the same time. Yes, so a short question is the way to go, and please definitely ask. So I'll get back to your question. So if you creating characters facet by facet, adding things in. Usually we start with some idea of the character we're going to be using, the character and the situation. Then we alter them depending on the needs of the story. But usually we don't come up with the characters out of whole cloth. They will be bits and pieces of people we know, things we've read, things we've seen. Sometimes it'll be somebody pretty well, will be very clear to you, but you pick them for a reason. And they can, rather than being irritated when they have a say, see what it is, the reason why you've picked them and what they're doing there. So here's an interesting question that just came up from Lauren. Hi. Thinking about a short story I'm writing now. It's important that one of the characters be a mother, and I don't have children. I don't relate to that. How to get inside a mother's head? Well, a good way to do that is make a list of the kind of things that a mother, depending on the age of the child, the kind of things that a mother, and it's not just any mother, it's the mother in your story. What do you need that mother for? Do you just feel like you have, too many childless people, and that, this whole aspect of life is unrepresented, and you'd like to make sure that the bases are covered? Start with the basics. What's her day? What's her day look like? You can figure most of that stuff out pretty easily. You can read a mother's blog, mother's blogs, and get some idea of what parental concerns are. And then imagine, here I am waking up at 6:30 in the morning to, What kind of a mother do you want? Do you want a mother who is everything is kind of running out of control, so they wake up at 6:30 and the house is a shambles and the kids are screaming and they can't find the sock, the shoe, the husband's mad, you know? Is that the kind of mother you want? Do you want somebody who um, sees what people's needs are and can see behind the screaming and whatever to, where can they intervene? I think that you can relate to motherhood and childhood. You were a child, you had parents, um, you you can observe and you can imagine. So observation is very good. You can go to a park and just watch how the kids and children interact, kids and parents interact. You can watch them in the store. You can, go to a family gathering and notice what's going on. You can talk to people who are parents and say, what's your life like, and what would you change if you could? What's your biggest regret? What's your biggest pleasure, etc. So observation and also going down and imagining yourself in that situation. And it can be done. You people write about, imagination is why we do this. Readers can imagine themselves in a book if you're vividly imagined. And we can imagine ourselves into positions that we've never been. Certainly women have written about men have written about women from points of view. I don't know if it's important that she be a mother, then it's important, then there's already a certain kind of mother that she is, and it doesn't have to be like any other kind of mother. You can imagine your own kind of, what kind of mother you would be if you were a mother, or if like the worst side of yourself was a mother, or your best side was a mother, or your spiritual side was a mother. You can picture that mother as a very specific kind of person, and then they can have you figure out what kind of a relationship you want them to have with the child, if that's important to the story. You need to be able to relate. If you're going to be a writer, you need to be able to relate to people who have experiences different from you, and you imagine, and then you also observe and do some research. Write it the way you want, and then talk to people who might have that experience and say, am I getting this right? You can fathom the complexities if you just think of it step by step. Talk to somebody who has a new baby, or look at their Facebook pages. Talk to look at blogs of people with newborns. Sometimes people will confide in you more person to person what it's like. And then talk to somebody who has a 2-year-old. What's the difference between the newborn and the 2-year-old? What's the difference, in your development as a person? It can be done, and I think it should be done. Motherhood, fatherhood, that's one of the basic pillars of life. You're going to be dealing with this over and over if you're going to be a writer. So you might as well dig in. What else can I? What else? How do you develop a particular character's speech and dialogue? Oh, here's a question. People with newborns have time to write blogs. Who else are they going to talk to? They often do. How do you... Yeah, so you can use library research. Women's memoirs about motherhood will tell you, so much. And it depends on your kind of a mother, a jokey, complaining kind of blog. If you have a very internal, philosophical, spiritual kind of woman, might not be your person. But you're getting information for sure. So how do you develop a particular character's speech and dialogue? That is really a good question. You know, we've talked about the writer's notebooks, assembling writer's notebooks. And one of the things, because, as part of dialogue, is gesture and expression. You know, a person's physicality doesn't disappear when they begin to emit words out of their mouths. And it's very, very helpful to listen to movies, listen to the news, listen to anywhere where people are talking, and try to characterize people's voices. Try to characterize people's voices, and see if you can make a huge list, you know, and describe people's voices. Use musical, all the musical notes. You know, what is the you know, the timbre of somebody's voice? What is the you know, if it was a musical instrument, what kind of instrument would it be? If it was a texture, what kind of texture? Is it going to be using all the synesthesia of the sense exercises that we've talked about? Is it a sandy voice? Is it a silky voice? Is it, you know, if it was an animal, if it was a bird, if it was a natural phenomenon, what would it be? And then as you fill your notebooks with voices, then when you need to characterize somebody's voice, in their dialogue, you can go to your notebooks and go, oh, you know, I can give them, you know, Keith Carradine's voice, you know, the sandy Western voice, or maybe give them, you know, Cary Grant's voice or Dylan Thomas's voice. But you have to have done that research already. You do that and you just amass voices. You know, can you describe Barbara Walters' speech impediment? You know, can you describe Hillary Clinton's voice? You can give that to, you know, the principal or the mother or something. But unless you've done that work, listening and how to capture a voice, super important. And it's a person's breath. Depends on their character, their health. Are they impatient? Do they speak quickly? Going to have a lot of words? Do they interrupt other people? Gives you a sense of an impatient personality. Somebody with a lot of vigor is going to speak differently than somebody who just isn't feeling that well, kind of depressed. You know, there'll be a lot of ... They trail off. A timid person, you know, apologizes a lot. So you have to decide who the person is emotionally, physically, to start deciding what kind of a sentence they speak. Do they, you know, you have to know their level of education, because then you'll know what their vocabulary would be. You have to know what their profession is, because they often take metaphor from their profession. A plumber uses different metaphors than a baker does. So that's going to help you a lot in developing a character's speech and dialogue, is a sense of their physicality, their profession, their background, their health, the power relationships between people. You know, a powerful person will speak longer before the other person interrupts them. A person who feels that they have less power will let somebody go on and on, whereas a person who feels more equal in power to that person will cut them off at a certain point and just will not let them have a monologue like that. So a lot depends on the power relationships between people. Have you had a character you imagined in one way in the story, but changed as the character progressed? Absolutely. Always. Always. You always are adjusting. You learn things about them. You know, as I've said, often you've been writing, you know a certain amount about them, and then 80 pages in, you kind of run aground. You've run out of what you know about them. And then you have to do the three-dimensional character study that we talked about. Take a look at that. It's in Lagos Egri's The Art of Dramatic Writing, uh, where you're looking at their physiology, their psychology, and their sociology. Their backgrounds and you need more information. I talk to a character, I talk to other people in the story and have them tell me about the character. And often I come up with things I didn't know from like talking to their parents or their brother or something like that in my imagination, because that's what I do all day. So I sit here and talk to myself. At one point, the characters start talking to me. Is there room and time in a short story? Absolutely. When you don't know, you talk to that character. Um, these are not paper dolls. Characters have living roots, and the roots are in you. So by seeing them as other people, you can, in essence, you're having a conversation with yourself, which is one of the reasons that we don't know what's in there until we start going there. It's one of the interesting things about writing, is that you're actually unpacking what you feel about life, how you see things. Okay. Yeah, so I know I have a list of, it might be under sounds in my writer's notebook. Let's see. Or is it under characterization? But in my writer's notebooks, these are big notebooks with all my research in them. When I do this work, I'll put them in portraits, or I'll put them, these lists of voices, for instance. There we go. Yes, I did. It's in characterizations. I've done all my relatives. Clear, high voice, unexpectedly assertive and precise. That's a small child. Here's my mother, plump, telephone voice, conversational, chest-rich, cheerful, friendly, rich undertones, not listening, talks while she does something else. And then I have traits of her speech. Yam says gal, taken to speaking softly, then angry when you don't hear them. Rich, warm laugh. There's a... Here's a friend of mine, high, light woman's voice, very soft and caring, a nurturing voice, a little breathy, a little innocent, but with an Eastern well-bred lilt. Musical. Here's another, an acquaintance I knew, high, clear, no-nonsense voice with a nice anti-imitation for humorous moments. There's an earnest boyishness to her manner of speech. Wow. That's, something, a characteristic. She speaks slowly like an elementary school teacher when she wants to be kind, like an earnest 12-year-old boy. Here's a cousin, slow, rich, a bit pedantic, irony rather than open mirth, like he's tasting wine. Here's Tom Brokaw, who was a... oh... oh... here's Tom Brokaw. The typical deepened TV reporter voice, but there's a speech eccentricity, the swallowed L. Listen up, like Dallas, he would say. Dan Rather, the deep, sincere tones of the Midwesterner, the slight hint of the Texan. Richard Burton, a great lion of a voice, or soft like sandpaper, a voice of pure passion. T.S. Eliot, a thin, precise voice like crumpling paper. So you listen and then you you're trying for a texture, smell, tone, anything like that, anything you can get your hands on. And gesture as well, to watch movies, watch TV, pause and see if you can describe the gesture, the way people are sitting, how they cross their legs, what are they, what are they doing with their hands. And all this comes into writing about writing character. The title of the book that has the three-dimensional character study is The Art of Dramatic Writing by Lagos, Lajosegri. And it's for playwrights, and there are many things in it that are not for fiction writers. But that three-dimensional character study you go to over and over and over again. My book is falling apart. So here were a few tips about writing and characterization. Don't be afraid to talk to your characters. Get it really quiet, create it like a visualization state, like a meditative state, and really imagine that character coming and sitting next to you on the bench and asking them questions. Super useful. So, well, thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed Writing Wednesday, and we'll talk to you next week. And leave questions on my author page anytime, and I'll collect them and do them next week. Okay, bye.